Sometimes the best way to really get to know a city isn't through a history book, but through the story of one person who lived there. So today, we're going to dive into the life of Betty Seaver and see how a person and a place, in this case San Diego, can kind of grow up together, shaping each other along the way.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? How does a place shape a life? I mean, think about your own hometown for a second. The streets you grew on, the sounds, the smells. How did all that make you who you are? That's the exact connection we're going to trace through one pretty amazing life. And the life we're talking about is Betty Seaver's. Now, she wasn't famous, she wasn't a politician, but her story is this remarkable thread woven right into the fabric of San Diego, a city that was changing and growing up right there with her. Okay, so let's start where every good story does, at the beginning. We're talking about Betty's childhood. We're going to head back in time to the early 20th century to a San Diego neighborhood called Brooklyn Heights. Betty's connection to the city was deep. I mean, it started way before she was even born. Her dad's parents built their family home here back in the late 1890s. Then her mom's family packed up and moved from Chicago around 1911. So by the time Betty came along in 1919, her family's roots in San Diego were already firmly planted. And what a world to grow up in. Just try to picture it. You'd have streetcars clanking down 30th Street, your mom would send you to the local Piggly Wiggly for groceries, and from your own house, you could actually hear the bells from the California Tower and the sounds of animals from the San Diego Zoo. It was this whole unique soundtrack to her childhood, with her own little playhouse, Mi Casita, right at the heart of it. And speaking of the zoo, Balboa Park was just 4 blocks away. For Betty, this wasn't just a park. It was her cultural playground. The museums, the gardens, all that amazing art, it was basically an extension of her backyard. And being around all that from such a young age, well, it lit a fire for art in her that would last her entire life. So that love of art is a thread that runs through her whole story. But first, life happens. We're moving into the next chapter now, young adulthood. This was a time of huge personal change for Betty, all happening against the backdrop of a world at war. So Betty graduates from San Diego State with her art degree and ends up teaching at her old junior high. One of her students invites her over for dinner, and who's there but the student's cousin, a guy named Fred Seaver. It's that classic story, right? The California girl, totally rooted in her hometown, meets the guy from Massachusetts who moved out west for a job in the aircraft industry. And yeah, the romance kicked off almost right away. And the next few years were just a total whirlwind. They got married in 1942 with World War II in full swing. Their first son arrived the next year, then Fred joins the Navy, so Betty moves back in with her parents, trying to balance a job and being a new mom all on her own. Fred comes home on early 46, and boom, just a few months later, their second son is born. It's just an incredible amount of life. Love, war, babies, all packed into a few crazy years. Now, with the war finally over and their family getting bigger, Betty's story comes full circle. She and Fred settle right back in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood, and she really steps into this new role as a kind of community matriarch. And she dove right back into the community that raised her. She was active in the PTA at her old elementary school, she kept substitute teaching, and she'd spend her Saturdays out painting scenes of San Diego. After their third son, Scott, was born in 1955, her life was just this beautiful mix of family, community, and art. And eventually, all that blossomed into her most treasured role, being a grandmother to 4 granddaughters. As her kids grew up and started families of their own, Betty moved into a new phase of her life. This is where that artistic spark from her childhood finally got the space it needed to really burst into flame. You can really see her artistic journey take shape. It started with that degree from college. That was her foundation. For years, painting watercolors was her main outlet. But then, in the 1970s, she found a brand new passion: enameling on copper, and she went all in. She joined the Enamel Guild and even started volunteering at Spanish Village in Balboa Park, the very same place that had inspired her as a little girl. How amazing is that? And I mean, this was way more than just a hobby. Betty bought her own kiln to fire her pieces. She created these gorgeous, intricate things: angels and birds and special plates. And sure, her art was sold in galleries, but more importantly, it became a tangible piece of her family's history. Every piece was a treasured heirloom, a little physical memory of her love and creativity. So this brings us to the final chapter of Betty's story. This is the part that really gets to the heart of who she was and the legacy she left behind for everyone who knew her.
After Fred passed away in 1983, Betty was 63 years old. She had to face life as a widow, but she did it with this quiet strength and independence that was just, wow, truly remarkable. Get this, she had never gotten a driver's license. But that didn't stop her. From her new home in Point Loma, she figured out the entire San Diego bus system and would go everywhere. Downtown, to take classes, to meet up with friends. She just kept going. In an interview, someone asked her what her philosophy of life was. Her answer was so simple and so perfect. She said to be kind to everybody. And when you look back at her story, her dedication to her family, her involvement in the community, just her gentle spirit, you realize those weren't just words she said. That was the guiding principle for her entire life. So if you had to boil Betty Seaver's life down to just 3 words, these would have to be them. Artist. Her creativity was a constant, a part of everything she did. Matriarch. She was the absolute heart of her growing family. And through, a San Diegan. You simply cannot tell her story without telling the story of her city. Betty's story really shows us how a remarkable life is often built on a simple but profound foundation. And it kind of leaves us with a question to think about. For her, it was kindness. So what about for you? What is the simple philosophy that will define your life?